Salutations! Welcome to Spiritual Blitherings, Philosophical Ponderings, and Everything Ramblings at the Hopeful Humanist Cafe. I'm your host, Steve, the Hopeful Humanist, and this is a Just Some Guy production. I'm kind of just mesmerized by the moment. That's why I kind of paused there briefly. The wind is alive and it just invigorating to be outside. It's beautiful autumn afternoon, all the beautiful fall colors. You can hear my door here creaking, sounds of life. I like it. I'm in the shed and it just feels like a really electric moment. I don't know if you can hear the birds in the background there too. They seem excited. And I'm excited. I'm excited to talk a little bit more about conflict and conflict resolution styles. There's something specific that I want to talk about. It's a discussion that I often have about a helpful step in the conflict resolution process. It's a comparison to a microscope, kind of like a metaphor for an essential step of the conflict resolution process. But I did say that, at some point we're going to have to get a definition. At some point I figured we should tackle Kilmann's conflict resolution styles, and hopefully we're going to move toward the creation of a kind of a take it and make it your own list of things to do to solve conflict. So first of all, I've been thinking about a definition for conflict. And if you go into the dictionary online, Webster, Oxford, you'll get similar ideas about a difference of opinion, an argument of some sort, a bumping up against of two positions that are kind of diametrically opposed. And I'm not opposed to that definition, but I did come across a definition, and in the show notes I'm going to leave a link to the video so you can see where I got the idea. But they provided this definition of conflict, for conflict. And it's conflict exists when one person has a need from another person that's not being met. So I enjoyed this definition. I was drawn to this definition because it allows us to be mindful that conflicts might have something to do with the hierarchy of needs that we've talked about in past episodes. Maslow's hierarchy of needs in terms of the basic physiological needs, the safety needs, the love and belonging needs, self-actualization needs, first self-esteem needs and then self-actualization. And some would say that as a fair critique of Maslow's theory, which is a number of decades old now, that perhaps there's an even additional level, an additional needs stage, and that would be self-transcendence, which I find definitely interesting in a conversation in and of itself. But yeah, I like this definition. It could be that when we talk about this idea of needs, I think it allows us to explore how conflict could be something that is interpersonal. It is between people. Could be between parties. It could be between groups, nation states. It's also something that could be more of an inner experience, like you have a need that you're not meeting. You have a need for, let's say, a future financial security, which would mean that you need to get a job, but yet you're not feeling motivated, and so you have a conflict, and it's an inner conflict. Like, how can I get myself out of bed so I can show up for my online Zoom courses during this COVID-19 pandemic situation, so I can secure a financial future for myself, so that I can have the qualifications that I need, that I can get a job. And then the other one, the last one in terms of needs is, I have a need not to be blown around by a strong gusting wind that might blow me off my balance and cause me to hit my head. And that would be external or situational, right? So I like that definition. I think it's pretty broad, and I like the idea that it's broad because it allows us to kind of realize that some of these the things that we would list, the steps that we would take to resolve conflict, might apply to the fact that we just can't get out of bed in the morning to attend a class to get our education, and that is a conflict. In terms of the external circumstantial reality of COVID-19 and the fact that inwardly we have this intrapersonal situation where we're not feeling motivated, but yet we have a need for safety, security of financial, a secure financial situation. So yeah, this definition, I'm going forward, I feel like it's one that I'm going to keep coming back to. I invite you to do your own research, your own explorations to see what definition that you're open to, one that speaks to you. So we have this idea of conflict, what it is. And if we go to Thomas Kilmann's theory of conflict resolution styles, we have the idea that there are these 5 different styles. And each of these styles have different degrees of assertiveness associated with them and different degrees of cooperativeness connected to them. And so you can have someone who's collaborative, or a collaborative arrangement where there's high levels of assertiveness that are taking place. Usually you would think that because it's a collaborative approach and it's working well, that you have in terms of group formation, a place where people are norming and performing together, that there's a recognition of strengths, there's an ability to make I feel I need statements. And so we see this high level degree of assertiveness with also a high level degree of cooperativeness. And so we're not going to have a situation where people are going to be focusing more on position. They're probably going to be focusing more on interest and trying to get a win-win situation, create solutions for a win-win situation. They're not going to engage in ad hominem attacks. They're not going to be focusing on the position so much so that they attack the other person as opposed to speak to the interests that are on the table. So that would be one style. Another style would be the competing style, which would be a high level of assertiveness, low level degree of cooperativeness. And you might see, in terms of this style, you might see those ad hominem attacks. You might see the blame game taking place. In terms of listening, you're probably not going to be experiencing or witnessing a great deal of, taking turns going back and forth for people to share their positions and to try to identify, first of all, is there a problem, and if there is, what is the problem, like defining the problem. It's more or less you're a bull in a china shop, or you're a shark, and you're just going to go claim your prize without thinking about the impact it has on other people. Moving along, we have the avoiding style, which has, in terms of assertiveness and cooperativeness, low levels of both, low levels of assertiveness, low level of cooperativeness. We see maybe perhaps the idea would be a person would be stepping into an ostrich approach to things, or a turtle. They're just avoiding the situation. They might be in this kind of space of denial. And then we can get to accommodating, where we see that there's not much assertiveness that's taking place, but high degrees of cooperation. So you kind of might find that if you're adapting this style, you might at times feel like a welcome mat. You might feel resentment after a while. But I mean, if the thing is valuing relationships, prizing the relationships, not wanting to sacrifice or take chances with the relationship, this might be an approach that some people might use. And then lastly, yeah, that's the door, that's the wind, if you can hear that background banging. And then the last one would be the compromising, where there's medium amounts of assertiveness, medium amounts of cooperativeness, and it's identified as a lose-lose situation, whereas the collaborating approach would be a win-win situation. Now, I guess the question I find interesting is, we could ask the question, is there an approach which is the best approach? Which is the best approach? And I feel it to be true that we want to reach towards a collaborative style or a collaborative approach in terms of tackling problems. But there might be situations where, because of the dynamic, because of power differentials, that the collaborative approach might not work, and you might be attempting to have a discussion and negotiate a problem with a person that's taking a shark-bull competitive approach. And in terms of that situation, you might have to figure out how you can use different, like a collection of styles all at once, to try to make sure that you can bring your voice to the table and be heard. And to make sure that your interests are in front view for everyone to see, so that you can somehow creatively come up with mutual solutions, solutions for mutual gain, creative solutions for mutual gain. These some ideas that I've been sharing are definitely Fisher and Uri approaches for negotiating, and these ideas are contained in the book called Getting to Yes. And then there are the different things that you can do, that you can create that list of action steps that you can do in terms of trying to tackle a conflict. And I think I'm going to wait for that to talk about a little bit more directly in a different episode in the future. But I will leave some stuff in the show notes for some other resources. The thing I want to get to, though, is one step, because I want to move into what are the steps that one should take in terms of the conflict resolution process. And one of the most important steps, I think, would be that at some point, you have to recognize that conflict is an emotional process. And so we'd have to engage in some mindful activities so that we can become aware of what we're feeling, identify the feelings, and then kind of manage those feelings that might be getting in our way of actually having a discussion. And William Uri, in the book Getting to Yes, and Fisher talked about this idea of going to the balcony. So it's kind of stepping back, recognizing you're upset, and stepping back and going to the balcony, getting perspective, getting a glance from above, look at what's going on. And that when you do this, you'll be able to see the terrain that's before you. But I think, too, that there's an opportunity when we go to the balcony for us to do this thing called putting ourselves under the microscope. Now, I feel that if I was to say to someone that's having a conflict, I'm like having a conflict and I'm not sure how to proceed, I'm really upset, and they state their position, the experience that they've had, that's resulted them feeling upset and frustrated with the situation. That I have a sense that if I said, what do you think would happen if you put yourself under the microscope? Or maybe the first step might be, once you go to the balcony, and you take a step back, you breathe, you kind of recognize your feelings, you manage your feelings, do the emotional intelligence stuff, and then put yourself under the microscope. I think what might happen is someone initially might be upset with me, and they might be thinking that I'm suggesting that they are to blame. Oh, you want me to put myself under the microscope? Oh, so you think this is my fault? It's like, no. One way to get perspective in terms of being at the balcony is to put ourselves under the microscope and kind of look at our part in the experience, and to, with a calmness and a deliberateness, kind of look at the situation and ask ourselves, is there anything that we could have done or we can do differently moving forward? And I think that once we put ourselves under the microscope, it's fair then for us to suggest that when someone else has an opportunity or takes the opportunity to go to the balcony, that we invite them to possibly also participate in that sort of activity and share. I put myself under the microscope. I'm going to share some thoughts, later when you're calm and I'm calm, and I like to invite you to maybe put yourself under the microscope as well, so that we can maybe come back and look at the situation, look at our parts in the process, ask ourselves, could we have done anything different? Now, sometimes I think when we put ourselves under the microscope, that we might just discover that we're actually good with what we've done. We're like, what? All things considered, I feel like I really did handle that situation well. And I, in terms of my values and my principles, like I stand by the actions that I initiated. But knowing that now, and if you could have a chance to put yourself under the microscope, we can see where we stand and perhaps what it is we need to do to move forward, because in terms of this process, it will reveal to us the choices that we make, that we stand by. I suggest are revelatory. The revelatory nature of choice. They reveal things about us, and that it's important that we're conscious of them, because then they allow us to become aware of our interests and our values and the things that we need to put on the table, so that we don't got to get stuck. We don't have to get stuck in a position that usually will result in very little movement moving forward, because people they lock in. They're unmovable. And perhaps because of that, we get caught up in some tunnel vision. And so this is just my one little tip in terms of the conflict resolution process for what I believe would be one of the initial steps in the conflict resolution experience, where we recognize that there's a problem, or we're experiencing something that we're going to be describing as problematic. We step back. We recognize there could be benefit to calming ourselves down, managing our emotions, going to the balcony, as Yuri would say, and putting ourselves under the microscope. And that once we do that, it seems like it would be fair, it would be legitimate for us to say to the other person, can you do that hard thing of putting yourself under the microscope? I think it takes a lot of courage to do that. And what is it that you're discovering when you put yourself under the microscope? So that's just a tip I wanted to share on this wonderful, windy autumn afternoon. Salutations, peace, be well, take care, and share.